And I think, there's a really big difference between being busy and being productive. And we don't want busy, we want productive. And so I don't care about butts and seats, right? Like we have a very fluid policy in terms of you need to work from home. Cool, right? Yeah, if you want to be in the office more, awesome, right? But I'm not going to be clocking you your 9 to 5. But for the most part, right, it's really a matter of just getting the work done. So let's talk about those things that are hindering you from getting the work done, and let's reprioritize so we can shut out some of the noise. I have to catch myself too. It's like, okay, I'm just doing some busy things. That's not the best use of my time. I need to do the things that only I can do. And I need everybody else to do the things that only they can do. And then that's how we get forward.
I'm Lorne Rubis, the host of Culture Talks, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Dr. Orianna Bretschger. And I'll talk a little bit more about her more in a moment. But you know that we focus on next-gen leaders and how they are taking on the world's nastiest problems and also building great workplaces. And Orianna, you are an inspiration. It's an amazing resume. But before we get into some of it, where are your feet planted right now? Where are you checking in from?
Feet planted right now in Escondido, California, so just outside of San Diego.
How great is that? So, well,
Love it.
yeah, you're living in paradise. So, how great is that? And when you look at your background, you've been the co-founder, and CEO since I think about 2016 of Aquacycl. And I think I love your tagline on industrial wastewater treatment made simple. And your solution to challenging wastewater treatment problems, we take care of the tough stuff so you can focus on your core business. And we want to hear a lot more about that here in a second, but your background, it's amazing, really. PhD from the University of Southern California. I was laughing because I was telling Garrett this morning when I was preparing to just get a little bit more in your background. You've written papers where I cannot pronounce the words.
I couldn't when I started either.
Your PhD's in material science, and I know you have a deep passion around full sustainability, but also supply chain management and the relationship of on-site wastewater management to that, and want to hear more about that. But also what you've done around women, your role at the Karche Women in Science Institute, where you've been a laureate there, and your work. And so we're going to dig both into your inspiration and the ups and downs of trying to address this wastewater issue, but also the kind of company you're trying to build, Orianna. And we want to hear both because I know you've got a lot of passion about that as well. But let's just dig in a little bit around, like if you're on a plane and you're sitting next to that person and they introduce themselves and they say, Aquacycl, what's that? What do you say?
I say we do industrial wastewater treatment, and usually I get a blank stare back. But then I'll kind of launch into we help clients like PepsiCo and Niagara Bottling and Diageo and Anheuser-Busch save money on their wastewater costs, and they're like, oh, there's wastewater, and then by the time we've finished the conversation, we're landed wherever our destination was. Most people don't think about wastewater. Water comes out of the tap, it goes down the drain, but there's a massive amount of infrastructure and people and resources that go to make that happen. And so I feel like it's a bit of my mission to be an ambassador for the industry whenever I can. And we talk generally about what is wastewater, why does it matter?
Yeah, I think I was watching one of your videos and it's like it's shocking around what percentage of water just still gets dumped without any treatment. I mean, first of all, it's like you kind of want to. It's scary, really. And then
80%. Yeah.
80%. How
Yeah.
could that be? How could we still be doing that? But here we are. So
2025.
so here we are as you're going forward with this, and I know you've had to be such a pioneer and you've had to, how do you manage through convincing people? What have you learned about helping people overcome resistance as you're trying to transform the way people think about something? What have you learned about that?
Ask questions first. And this is something I've tried to practice and everything now is really just let's understand where the person's baseline is, right? So level of understanding, level of interest, background. And so when trying to express something, I love to know who's the audience I'm talking to if I'm making a presentation. If I'm going into a meeting, okay, where are they coming from? What's their background? What have they done? And then ask some questions like, okay, what is your biggest pain right now? What keeps you up at night? And if it's water, let's dive into that. If you're in the sustainability or the climate field, okay, we care a lot about carbon, and that's important. But did you also know that the way that we move and treat wastewater today actually generates more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire shipping industry? And we only treat 20% of what we generate.
Wow.
Right. And so I'll lead with that. And then usually there's questions and then we go back and forth in questions. But in trying to convince or discuss, or you just, really share more about what the challenge is and why we're a part of it, it really comes down to meeting people, right, in their level of interest and what they care about.
So I'd like to go back to that time when you're sitting there and you decide that you've been a professor, you're at this one institute for a long period of time, 9 years, I think. And there you are, Orianna wakes up. It's probably maybe it's not like a spontaneous combustion, but like one day you wake up and go, I'm going to become a co-founder, an entrepreneur, and I'm going to go take on this tough ass problem. What inspired you to do that? Like, I mean, a lot more comfortable sitting there being a prof and, a lot easier. I mean, I'm not denigrating that role. I mean, that's an important role too, but let's face it, this is tough. You're raising money. You've been at this for almost a decade. It's like, this is tough. This is tough love. What inspires you? How do you get over the finish line? And what's your inspiration to these other men and women that are listening to this call?
Well, I'll tell you, I am an accidental entrepreneur. This was not in my plan. um, but if I had an opportunity to do it again, I would. I would do some things different. But when I was still at the Research Institute, I had a grant, and it was a big $5 million grant that was given to my group to take what we had developed in the laboratory and bring it out into the field and see if it can actually work, right? And our mission at Aquacycl and our research focus then as well was sanitation for all. Wastewater is a global problem, but if you just look at the sewage aspect of it, more people today have a cell phone than a toilet, right? And that's been the case for decades since we've had cell phones. So, we started there in that mission, and the Roddenberry Foundation, who gave us this grant, was aligned with that mission. And so part of what we were tasked to do as part of this grant was, is there a business that we can make out of this? And, granted, we were looking at sanitation and specifically in emerging markets. And so, we had to kind of take a step back as researchers and say, all right, well, how would we make a business out of this? And just coming from the research background, whenever you write a grant, there's always this paragraph called the broader impact, right? It's like, how is your work going to impact the world? And how could you make this, really reach into a much broader, part of life? And so you get one paragraph, right? And that's how we thought about it as researchers. And that's how I thought about it while I was running this grant. And that's how I also brought it to the Roddenberrys. At the end of the grant, we hit all of our milestones. We spent the money, and we came back to them and said, okay, here's what we have. It's the beginning of a product. We have an opportunity. We can keep it in the not-for-profit space and continue to fund it that way and develop it that way. But there's, it looks like there also is an opportunity to make a business here, from my naive lens at that point. And they actually made the decision for me. So said, okay, go forth, make a business. I naively said yes, not knowing what I was getting into. And that was the end of 2016. And they came on as our first investor. And this is what really helped me a lot, was they actually invested another $1 million into the company, but they set it up as a match. So they released $250,000 to get us going, and then they were going to give us the remaining $750 as soon as I raised $1 million from other people. So then I had to figure out what a pitch deck was and put a team together. What's really my beachhead market, like all the things that I'd never heard of before.
Yeah. Those words are probably as new to you as some of these words that material science are new to me, right? 100%.
100%.
You said something in that intro that I would do it differently. What would you do differently?
Well, I made all the classic mistakes of not, you don't know what you don't know coming into building a business if you don't have that background, if you haven't done it before, right? And as many classes as you might take in entrepreneurship or whatever, it's your business is unique, your challenge is unique. There's just so much that you don't know. Now that I've got hindsight, vision on this, I would have set up the business immediately to be a C corp and not an LLC to help me raise money easier. I went through a very painful reorganization as we started to take on our first price round. Learned a lot from it. It went fine. Everybody was super supportive, but it was a big lift. I would have been much more cautious and realistic about how long it's going to take to raise money.
That's the thing, right? How hard it is, how
Yeah.
long it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then also I would have looked, I think, more broadly beyond the initial scope of what we had developed the technology for. This was the biggest challenge that I had coming out as a researcher is I have to stop talking about a tech and start talking about the problem that we're solving and the business that we're building. And while I was coming out, giving 20-minute 30-minute presentations about the technology and all the science behind it. Nobody cares, when you're getting into the business side, as long as you're solving the problem, right? And it has to be a big enough problem in order to really bring an investor and investor interest and to be able to build a business around it. And the problem is huge, but it also has to be segmented into different ways of thinking and different customer bases and profiles for us to be able to say, okay, what do we do first? Can't do
yeah.
everything all at once.
What that's a complicated navigation. And it's interesting that you say that, Ariana, because I've been a bit of an entrepreneur. I've had a couple of startups and things. It's so hard. Well, it's always been hard for me to kind of always remind myself that it's about the problem and not about the offering. And it's shockingly straightforward. Like we all know it, but it's so seductive to get into the solution, focus on that, but the customer wants to talk about the problem. And it's that it's that simple and that hard at the same time. Hey, this is a little bit of a selfish question in the sense that I've got four granddaughters, and tell me about you as a little girl. What was Oriana like? What was she like?
I was always outside. And I was, yeah, digging in the dirt, playing in the sandbox, exploring. I was always, I guess, an observant kid. I was looking around and asking a lot of questions, as my mom would tell me. And she always likes to tell the story of even when I was little, like not even walking around yet. I was always looking up, right? I was fascinated by the night sky. And when I, eventually got into my college career, I majored in physics and astronomy. I was just in love with astronomy as a younger student. And then I kind of geared a little bit more to physics and then aerospace and now water. But yeah, I was always curious, asking questions and outside.
If you were sitting with our, in this case, the three youngest ones, the 11-year-old, the 9-year-old, and the 8-year-old and the 6-year-old, and they asked you questions, and you sit in a circle beside you, what would you say to them? What would you do to encourage them?
Continue to ask those questions, right?
Very odd.
Yeah, don't be afraid to raise your voice. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Don't mute yourself, right? If you're curious about something, explore it. Find every resource that you can to do so. And it's okay to get dirty. Go do it,
Love
right?
that. I love that. Love that. I'm going to share that with them, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the kind of company you're trying to build. Like my whole life is, and by the way, I want to mention that you and I are connected loosely through the fact that you're a fellow of the Unreasonable Group. I'm a mentor there. Thank you for that, by the way. That's just an inspirational. You fellows are just unbelievable. But the and with that is the kind of company you're trying to build. And I was curious about your six principles. And I think you probably have those six principles in your company. One was catalytic change, customer first, embrace diversity, open communication, slash trust, transparent leadership, and then a piece on innovation. Are those your core six that drive your thinking, your way of running?
They're at the core, but we actually have 11 documented
Okay.
core
Okay.
values for
Okay.
the company. And the number one is that team starts with trust. And that's a big part of our culture. The other one is humble pie is our favorite flavor.
Love it.
Because
Love it.
nobody knows everything. And it's super important to ask those questions and not make assumptions, but really come in right with curiosity. And that's how we're going to best solve the big challenges. And then, the big mission, right, is sanitation for all. And so impact is our North Star. Right. We don't work just for profit, but we also work for people and purpose and planet. And so, as we're building the team, those are really, major values that we're hiring for. And that we want to keep cultivating, right, as we go forward. And foundationally, right, nothing is impossible. It may be hard, right? That's what, if it were easy, it'd be done already. But as long as it doesn't violate the rules of thermodynamics or business ethics, right, we can get it done. And so giving people space to be creative and not feel like they have to stay within a certain boundary when innovating, right? But challenge each other, but respectfully, and then make sure that we're always showing up for each other. And that includes not just our team, right, but our clients, our investors, and the people that are supporting us and our mission as we go forward. So, Indra Nooyi's book about her time as CEO of PepsiCo, I think she said it really, really well. Is, when she got in there, she wanted to create a culture where everybody can bring their whole self to work, right?
Yeah.
And that's important for us.
Yeah, she's a real inspirational CEO, and I really I want to park there for a minute because I explore this. This is part of the way I think about. I have a framework around what I when I teach my Harvard class in culture and what I do, and it's and to bring more construct to culture, so it's not just mush. And I do talk about the importance of purpose and values, and I love it when I can say that. But when I talk to a CEO who's right in the crunch of the world and you're talking about it, it has a lot more credibility. How important has been purpose and having those 11 values to Aqua?
It's been really important. And we, every all hands meeting that we have, we talk to, a few of them in detail. And actually the last all hands meeting we had this past quarter, we had a whole exercise around our core values. And it was kind of fun. It was a creative exercise. We have people that work in different parts of the country, and so we try to bring everybody together at least quarterly so we can build that team culture, etc. But our people and culture team actually put together a really nice exercise where we were planting our values. So we all painted a pot with the value that we identify the most with, and got creative, and then planted little succulents. So they're around the office now. So that was a very fun exercise. But it's really important as we hire. It's important in every performance review. It's important in every discussion. Sometimes when we're setting, meeting ground rules around, okay, how we're going to innovate something or tackle a big problem. It's like, okay, humble pie is our favorite flavor. Nothing is impossible. We got each other's back on this. So let's get to the problem.
I love it. By the way, that humble pie piece, I love the way you've described that because I believe being confident and humble is really hugely important. Favorite humble pie, your favorite flavor. I love that. So if I were coming to Aquacycle and I was enthusiastic potential contributor that you were hiring, and I was sitting down with you and you were gonna I only had about 10 minutes with you. You're gonna ask me some tough questions. Give me a couple. What are the Orianna kind of all right, I'm talking to the founder and the CEO. Yikes. Throw me the hard balls.
Yeah. Well, I really just like to understand a little bit about how people think and what they find to be challenging and how they work through those challenges. So one of the first questions I'll ask a candidate in early in the screening process is, okay, this can be personal or professional, but describe to me one of the biggest challenges you've ever faced in your life. How did you get through it? And would you do it again?
I love it. I love it. Well, that is such a great question. What do you find out when people answer that question? Like, what are you always surprised about?
Well, I find a lot about, okay, what they really value, and what they've really found to be challenging. When I speak to parents, almost always the answer is one part of their answer is becoming a parent and having kids and trying to be that parent that I always wanted to be. I don't find that surprising, but it also shows me like, okay, this is something that they deeply care about and they're striving for, which is awesome. And then sometimes they'll go into They'll share some very personal challenges that they've had to really work through. So it helps us connect, and gives us a level of kind of transparency with each other, kind of building a little bit of trust. Depending on what they're comfortable sharing, right, tells me a little bit about how they're going to be interacting with the team and how transparent they're going to be, right, in doing that. And then also, that key point of, would you do it again? Are they willing to take on more challenges, right? Is this something, do they like a challenge? Because doing this is going to be a challenging job. And so the folks that are really successful on the team are the ones that, like, oh, this is going to be tough. Awesome. It's not the ones that are shying away from really
Yeah.
tackling something difficult.
And I want to connect that back to how you almost started the 11 values is around really the foundation of trust. Why does that? I've heard it's interesting over the last, I don't know, period of time. Trust has been around for a long time, obviously forever, but the word has emerged more in conversations that I'm having with people. Why do you think that is? Like, what's underlying that for you, Oriana?
Sure. Yeah. So for trust to me really is, you can't do everything, right? You have to be able to rely on the person next to you, working that we're aligned and that we specifically have a goal in mind together that we're trying to achieve. And so I need to be able to rely on this person to be able to take a load, right? And they have to be able to rely on me to do the same thing. And that's not just in, the business sense, but also, my team needs to feel comfortable to say, hey, I got something happening in my life right now. I need to take a break, because that's important, right? I can't, I don't want somebody feeling like they can't come to me and say, okay, I need a mental day. Because if we're not able to rely on each other and trust each other and, bring 100% of ourselves to work, we're not going to be able to be successful as a team and as a company. And so that trust to me, right, is just that transparency, that understanding that we got each other's back. I think why it's come up so much more frequently in recent years is it's hard. The assessment of what's real and fake really comes, is now we're being tested on a daily basis on that, right? Can I trust the information that's being shared with me, through the various channels that I interact with? Can I trust that this image isn't artificial intelligence? Can I trust that, I can get to point A to point B that the map is telling me, right? And I think there's questioning of trust than there ever used to be before.
I think that's absolutely, I hadn't thought about how much so many other things in the macro world are really causing us to have doubt and that trust is under assault. And I think that's very, very wise insight. I want to give you a hypothetical situation only because I think our listeners learn so much around how CEOs have to think about this and founders. Let's say I'm PepsiCo's favorite cycle person. I know the technology. I'm just a maniac on knowing and understanding how to help. And I'll use PepsiCo. It could be any customer, but they love me. They love me. But in your office comes a constant quiet parade of people complaining about the disruption I cause in the team. Your customers love you. They tell you they can't do without me, but I'm a miserable, toxic person. And how do you navigate that? What do you do? Like, now your values are tested.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
does Oriana do?
Well, first thing is really try to get to the understanding of why, right? What's going on in this person's life that's creating this behavior? Is there anything that we can help with? Are there resources that we can bring to bear to help improve whatever's happening in this person's life, whether it's personal or professional? So having an honest discussion, right, about the behavior and doing it quickly. And then, bringing everything that we can, right, to align back to a place where this toxicity is no longer. If that doesn't happen, then we terminate, right? It's just not a good fit. It's not a good fit for that person. They're unhappy. It's not a good fit for us. We're unhappy. And that has happened several times in the course of operations where we just haven't been able to align. It's also happened where we've been able to bring everything back, right? But it's really based on, okay, where can we meet, right? Where can we meet in the middle? And understanding both sides and being willing to have those tough conversations.
Yeah. What's your advice to other leaders around when you look back in those situations? Is faster better? Confronting it earlier better?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Because
Yeah.
if it continues to spiral, right, and there's no acknowledgement of, hey, this is an issue. One, the person doesn't feel seen, so then there's even more behavioral things that could go on. Number two, right, we're not addressing what could really be a fundamental problem in that person's life, right? We're not helping them in the way that we could. And then once we get past those two steps, right, if there's still not an alignment that we can find, right, for improvement, for everybody to be happy, we got to sit down and we got to have that conversation sooner than later, because otherwise toxicity spreads very fast,
It does.
very fast.
That is so, and I'm really glad to have you emphasize that and that encouragement to other leaders that are listening to this. All of us have these days, Orianna, you may be less than others, but when we put our heads down on the desk and go, oh shit, this is like, I don't know, this is a lousy day.
Yep.
It's,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't, I don't know how do you get beyond those? How do you get through? And what's your advice to all of us working through the grind to try and keep shooting for the stars, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, I've got plenty of those days for sure. And I know I haven't always handled those days in the best way. So what I try to do is, the only things that we can control is how we react. That's it. There's so much around us that we have no control over whatsoever. So I have to remind myself of that, right? I can take control of my emotions in this situation, but sometimes I just have to take a breath, right? Like this today is not the day for me to have back to back to back meetings. I'm going to reschedule those things I can reschedule. I'm going to find some peace, and I'm going to find a way to bring myself back to, right, the positivity and the optimism. And as a leader, right, there's a lot of pressure to not show the cracks, to always be upbeat, to always have a great tone. But we're all human, and we all have a lot of weight on the shoulders as entrepreneurs. I find that, the most honest conversations I have with my team, just to say, hey, I'm having a tough day today. So, give me a little grace. And this doesn't happen super often, but that if I'm transparent to say, hey, I'm human too, like it makes the space for other people to do the same.
I completely agree. And it takes tremendous courage because, like you say, sometimes you feel like as the founder and the CEO, you got to, be this perfectly upbeat kind of, and there's just no way that you have to make yourself vulnerable, though. And how do you think your team reacts to vulnerability? Do you think it makes you look weak or does it make you look stronger?
I think it makes you look stronger, right? If people see that you're willing to share your vulnerability, right? People connect with that. The CEO title can be very intimidating. And there's a lot of assumptions that come with, this person does this, thinks this way all the time and does this all the time. But we're just human beings, and we all have challenges in our lives. And so I think if you can share that vulnerability, I think it goes a long way, and it helps other people also feel stronger and seen.
Yeah. What do you, if you were, just when you have a chance in a moment and you get a chance to appreciate everything you've done over the last decade or so and you and your team together, what are you most proud of? What do you think you just want to take a moment to appreciate and celebrate?
Yeah, I'm really proud of my team's accomplishments, right? So we have pretty high goals and some pretty significantly high bars and KPIs. The team delivers, right? And it's really cool to see, especially. So we've had folks that have been a part of the team now coming on to 7 years. And we're a 9-year-old company, and that's outside of my founder and myself, right? Or my co-founder and myself. And what is cool to see is how our team members have grown, right? We've got a person that started as an intern, and she's now our director of R&D. We have a person that really came to us. Their last job before us was at Home Depot, stocking the shelves and driving a forklift. Now they're going through and getting their engineering degree, and they do all of our CAD drawings. And so, it's really cool to see the development of folks, both from prior jobs and this one, where people are growing as individuals and growing with us as a company. That's super cool. In addition, of course, right, as a researcher, it's a real treasure, really, to see something that started the size of a coffee cup in a lab, now servicing clients, right, on a global stage and actually solving real problems. You don't get to see that super often as a researcher. And so I treasure that.
Yeah, I love to hear you talk about success and pride in the contribution of advancing others. I mean, you got to make your EBITDA numbers eventually, and you've got to, get that next round of funding and all that. It's a big and with that is how other humans are advancing connected to Aquacycle, both inside and outside the company. I've never explored this, and as we get to wrap up here, the next 5 minutes or so. I'm just curious because I read an article the other day from David Brooks, New York Times writer, who said that, and this is research based, so it's not just based on a bunch of opinion, but his data is that America in particular, but other Western countries, but particularly America has gotten not only somewhat lonelier and sadder, but meaner. And he had all his data behind it and what the root causes were. And that I was thinking about that because character is so important. And it's taken a back seat in some ways to, but there are other characters out there, there are people out there that don't believe character's important, that the end justifies any means. And I'm just curious around what role you think building organizations can have to advance character to we can solve world's biggest problems, and we need to make money, we need to get results. No results equals no job, and with that is character is important too. Now I'm obviously working a bias, but I'm just curious in your reaction to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that starts also right in your foundation of the company and how you set your principles, your values, and how you operate as a company, right? Because that's the person you're going to attract and the person that you're going to want to retain, right? Is aligned with ultimately what that company values and mission is, right? And so I think, it's a little bit self-fulfilling in a way, right? So if we have 11 values. We've got our mission of sanitation for all. Like we're very clear about that when we're hiring and when we're doing performance reviews. And if we might have somebody that has an extraordinary resume, but if they don't gel with the team on the interview process, if they can't demonstrate, right, some active values that align with ours, we're not going to hire them.
Yeah.
And so, I think that also maintains and helps to develop the character, right, of the company culture, but also, right, those are the characteristics we're hiring for.
Yeah, I know. I was just listening to you. I'd love to, like you be a person like I could see. I mean, when you deeply care, you care about who I am as an individual. You care about my well-being, even when I'm not my best behavior. You care about helping me get to a better spot. I mean, it's to be part of that kind of culture is such an important because how can we care about our customers if I don't care about you and you don't care about me? I mean, a deep care, right? I mean, it's hard with human beings. I want to, one area that I talk about being people first with companies is to take out waste, to take out negative friction. I'm thinking, wow, I'm dealing with someone here who manages in waste. And I wonder how she thinks about taking out negative friction out of people's work. How important is that from your perspective? As you're a curator of people's time,
Yeah.
how do you at Aquacycle help take out negative friction?
Yeah, we talk a lot about priorities, right? So we have a lot of internal discussions and multiple teams, right? On okay, these are our major milestones. Let's really focus on the key things that matter the most that are going to get us to that milestone. Okay, the other things can go to the bottom of the priority list and let's not worry about them. And I think there's a really big difference between being busy and being productive. And we don't want busy, we want productive. And so I don't care about butts and seats, right? Like we have a very fluid policy in terms of you need to work from home. Cool, right? Yeah, if you want to be in the office more, awesome, right? But I'm not going to be clocking your 9 to 5, and we have, of course, some HR things we have to do, but for the most part, right? It's really a matter of just getting the work done. So let's talk about those things that are hindering you from getting the work done, and let's reprioritize so we can shut out some of the noise. And those are, you know, sometimes daily discussions, maybe multiple times a day. And I have to catch myself too. It's like, okay, I'm just doing some busy things. That's not the best use of my time. I need to do the things that only I can do. And I need everybody else to do the things that only they can do. And then that's how we get forward.
I just love that you focusing on that. And also I just want to just go over there and give you a giant virtual hug around your view around not just counting butts and seats. What a waste of time. I mean, it's just nonsense. But anyway, it's about getting things done and getting the right things done in the right kind of way according to the values and of course, you got to get results. I mean, and we all know that. If, as for all of these folks that are listening going, they're at this decision making point around some place in their career, their what's next, or they're looking for the courage to take that next step. What's your advice to them, Mariana, as you wrap up like 10 years of doing this and you're going to give that nudge? What's that nudge you're going to give?
Just do it, right? Um, for a cheesy sports analogy, it's right on point. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so, I think, especially, I see this a lot in some of the younger folks, and I certainly saw it myself when I was younger too, reflecting. Um, Risk aversion is kind of implanted in our education system. And you want to do great on this test, and you graduate, and you go to the next best institution, and you graduate from that, and you do the next best thing, right? And you never want to fail, because failure means disaster. But the reality is, it's not disaster. It's learning, and you can't be afraid to fail. That's how you grow, right? Personally and professionally, and that's easier said than done. But putting the fear of failure aside and being able to take that risk and say, okay, this could totally not work out. I can lose my shirt. This could just go completely south. But you know what? This is important enough for me to take that risk and see where it can go, and be okay with the fact that, all right, it might not go the way I want to, but I'm going to learn something amazing out of it. And so if you can go into the next chapter with that mindset, it is freeing in a lot of ways, right? And that you've got a different goal. It's not to achieve this one thing, but it's really to be a part of a journey that grows you as a human, and hopefully something awesome to contribute to society.
You know what? It's so easy to talk about that in theory, but when I'm talking to someone like you who's living it and doing it, that's the real inspiration. I mean, and I know that you started by your career by looking at the skies. You still are, right? And thank you for that. Thank you for offering your time to our audience. And can't tell you how much we appreciate it, Oriana. I hope I have a chance to see you again through the unreasonable process in whatever way you're in it. Truly, you are an inspiration, and we need more people, leaders like you, and companies like Aquacycl, so we can make the world better overall. I know that sounds maybe that's corny, but that's what we're about. Any kind of lasting comments or final thing or any kind of thing you want to say about Aquacycl or yourself or anything?
Well, just thanks very much for the opportunity to share. Appreciated the conversation. I think, for future leaders and future entrepreneurs, especially those ladies, get out there and get dirty. There's no expectations that you need to meet other than the ones you set.
Get out there and get dirty. I love it. Granddaughters, you hear that? Get out there and get dirty. Thank you and bye for now.